here's what happened. You and I, we met on the side of a mountain in Utah for this endurance event, 29029. And you were participating. I was working one of the aid stations, and it's where you were hiking up to the summit and then gondola back down, and then repeating that until the equivalent of Mount Everest, which is just badass in its own right. And we'd every time you do that lap, we'd have a few minutes or a few seconds to connect. And I even remember one of those like tougher laps where we joked about trying to fly in a helicopter to bring you a steak forward to get through it. And I could tell in that moment that like you were on the mission to finish that event. And that's been now a little over 2 years now. So Skye, what in this current chapter of life, what is the mission for you right now?
My mission right now is to teach people, including myself, how to wake up every day and practice self-love and care about themselves as the number one priority in their life. And the mission hasn't maybe changed. It's probably been my mission for most of my professional life. But also I think it is never been more important than this time frame right now that we really work on this because of this concept that we have of self-love. I think people are being taught that it's not good to be selfish, and selfish around like your health, selfish around, taking care of you, selfish around time you spend, boundaries you create, all these things. And I think we really, really need to instill this concept and this idea in everyone out there that there's nothing more important than how I feel. There's nothing more important than taking care of this. And this, by the way, is not just for other people. This goes for me as well, right? Like I have to make sure if I'm not good, I can't be good for others. And it's so big.
Well, and it's interesting to know, like with the myths, like what are myths that you find yourself spotting with people that talk to you about how to focus on themselves? Like what are some of those things that come up for them?
Myth one is that if I make other people happy, I'll be happy. That's a big one. I call myself a recovering people pleaser. I think that we fall into a mode, especially with social media and, the way that we are it's so ironic because we're more connected than ever before with our cell phones, but yet we're more disconnected as human beings. And I think we have instilled this concept of, frankly, it's codependency around, okay, is my mom happy? Is my, my ex-wife for me happy? Are my kids happy? Oh, well, if they're happy, I'm good. And then what happens is you slowly take all focus outside of you and put it on other people. And very, very quickly, you wake up one day and you realize like all of your energy is going into these other people to try to make them happy. And the reality is you have zero impact. You can't make other people happy, And that's the biggest myth I think that people have that I've encountered is that, if I make others happy, I'll be happy.
Yeah. What is like that blueprint? Like if someone's coming in, like where do you even start with being able to focus in on self for that?
Yeah. Well, the reality is this is a concept I call being healthy selfish. Like the biggest question you need to ask. So if you're listening to this podcast, ask yourself this question: what do I do every single day to be selfish about my health? And when I say the word health, I'm not just talking about physical health. I'm talking about your mental health, your spiritual health, and your physical health. They all tie together. What am I going to do for myself today? Usually first thing in the morning, hopefully at the end of the day, and hopefully all throughout. But if you can at least start your day with a little bit of a practice, a routine, a structure around how to be healthy selfish, it gives you a fighting chance to sort of get through the day in this mode of being happy, so to speak, right? But the vast majority, I have my cell phone right here, right? If you're listening to this, I'm holding up my cell phone. The vast majority of people have this device within 3 feet of them almost 24 hours a day because of the fact they most likely are sleeping with it next to their head. The first thing they do when they wake up in the morning, their alarm goes off, most likely on their cell phone. They pick it up and they dive into what I call the three-headed devil, which is email, text, social media. And my theory is that, and I ask yourself this question, is the first thing you do when you wake up check your email, text, or social media in some order of those three? If the answer is yes, recognize the fact that the first thing you do in the morning is you are putting yourself into a state of anxiety and pressure and to-dos and things I didn't do, etc. And that is, I think, the biggest thing we need to do is we need to instead wake up, and first thing in the morning we do is we need to connect with this person. And this person is me, right? I need to connect with me. And how I do that is going to change for every single person out there. But I need to make sure I have a routine of connection that starts with me and does not start with other people. And so we took that myth of making other people happy. How do other people have access to us at 6 a.m? It's through our cell phone. So what if there's a world where you didn't have access to me? And in the morning, instead of me starting to text people or see what's come in overnight on email or going to social media to see who's responded to my messages or how many likes I've had on a post or anything else that you might be doing. Instead, if I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do, and for me, it sounds funny, but brush my teeth. Why is that? It's funny because in fact, it's really nothing like self-helpy. But for me, it's the symbolism of I'm starting my day clean and fresh. First thing I do, I brush my teeth, drink a glass of water. Next thing I do, depends on the day, how early I'm working out that day. I try to either do something physical or do something spiritual. So sometimes if I'm doing a 5 a.m. workout, usually we'll just sort of wake up, brush the teeth, drink a glass of water, and then roll into the workout kind of thing. If I have a little later, a little more time, usually I'll try to meditate first as well. So it depends on the day. It shifts around a little bit. But my goal every morning is to make sure I do something physical, spiritual, and mental for myself. And by the way, really big concept here, does not need to be big. It could be reading a page in a book. It could be literally doing a push-up. It's symbolism and consistency is more important than getting the perfect workout in or meditating for 30 minutes or reading 10 pages in a book or a chapter or whatever pressure we put on ourselves. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that comes up for me, and I resonate with it, is that the simplicity of it, like keeping it so simple. Like the bullshit that's out there sometimes where people think they have to read the whole entire book in a day and go through all the courses that they've got, like all like 12 hours, like just go nonstop on it. And how, like, because I think about that when I wake up, I resonate. I make my bed, and that's like my thing. Even as you were saying that, I was like, oh yeah, shit, that's something I do. That's like my clean, fresh. So how do you deal with all of that chatter that can come up for someone when they're not even thinking about how do I move the phone across, if it's across the room or out of the room? Like, how do you even just take time to navigate all that chatter that's going on in your mind?
Biggest thing is having a little bit of a practice around breath work, and I call it an appreciation practice, not necessarily gratitude practice, because sometimes gratitude can invoke some negativity. Ironically, appreciation is just pure positive energy for me. So for example, I felt today, even like I'm in the process of like really trying to market and sell a coaching course right now. And it's going well, but I still today felt anxiety, right? I felt that pressure. And just so everyone knows, we're recording this on a Sunday evening. It's like the Sunday scaries are kicking in, right? Oh my God, look what didn't I do this weekend? What do I have to do this week? So for me, before we got on this podcast, I didn't, by the way, this was not a long thing. I didn't write this down. I literally just took a minute to breathe, right? I literally just took a minute to breathe. I didn't even put a timer on. I just sort of sat here and breathed. And as I was breathing, in my mind, I started going down the line of appreciation of like, all right, what do I appreciate right now? And it was small, like little things. Like I did food shopping for the week, like little stuff like that. It's all the way to the fact that I launched and I'm running a very, very successful coaching company in the last 6 months. And I thought about the revenue I generated, right? And the appreciation I have that people are really leaning into this programs that I'm running and, all the above. So the biggest thing I think for people when they wake up is just breathe and appreciate, breathe and appreciate, breathe and appreciate. Right. And I think sometimes with gratitude, I think it can go into this like world of corniness, or like, people get sort of hung up on gratitude. And that's why I like appreciation a little bit more than gratitude, just because there's no judgment in it. It's just like, oh, I appreciate this water I'm drinking.
Well,
I,
why? Yeah, because I resonate. I had a block with gratitude like that. Whenever I hear that word, I feel like it's a door that's closed in front of me, and it's locked, and I can't open it. And so for me, I connected to wins. But why do you feel that there's that block with
yeah,
gratitude?
sometimes it can bring up pressure of things we're not doing. So like, oh, like I'm grateful for my mom. Oh my God, I haven't called my mom. Now I feel guilty. Right.
Mhm.
Oh man, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I'm in good shape. But man, I didn't get my workout in today. Like so sometimes it can invoke a little negativity in it, as opposed to appreciation. It's just like, it is just pure positive. It's just like, I appreciate this. I appreciate that. I appreciate this. And, once again, I'm not knocking gratitude practices. I do them. I think they're phenomenal. But if you are in a high state of anxiety, sometimes trying to practice gratitude can actually create more anxiety, because it could bring up some negativity, as opposed to, in my opinion, appreciation is just pure,
Mhm.
just pure.
Well, and it's interesting because one of the red flags that we talk about here is the chronic exhaustion. Towards when that comes up, you're hitting that burnout, and anxiety can then fuel the potential of all these future scenarios and options that can come up, and that overwhelm that can then result from it. So with appreciation coming into it, how do we then, if we have that space, all of a sudden we have space now, how do we then focus in on clarity to move forward? Because
Yeah.
there can be that feeling of getting stuck. You have that space, but then you get stuck in that. How do you move through it?
Yeah. I want everyone to just remember the number one. Like, just you have to make the action so incredibly small that it gets you going. What happens often when we have that panic attack, anxiety, right? Whatever's fueling you, where you almost like are paralyzed, right? Where you're almost like, oh my God, it is 5 o'clock. I didn't do anything today. Like, I didn't get anything done. Or how is it? How did time go by? Whatever is feeling it, I call it the tornado sometimes, because you're
Mhm.
just sort of spinning in a circle, not going anywhere. And so remember the number one. So when you're in that anxiety spin, tornado, whatever it is, you pick one thing that'll make you feel better, and you just do one step, right? So we keep on coming back to this one, but the reality is it could be, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to go work out, be like, I'm just going to go walk around one time around the block. And you got to break the spin, so to speak, that's happening inside your emotion and your mind, and just sort of calm it down. And so maybe it's, I'm going to do one push-up, right? Like, oh, whatever it is that you can boil it down. I'm going to meditate for 1 minute before getting on this call, right? Boil it down into such a small thing that just moves you forward in a little bit, in just a step. And that's how you start the process.
Yeah. How do you deal with the excuses that people come in of feeling the guilt or the shame or the embarrassment of like doing something so small
Yeah.
as like one push up or getting my shoe? It's one of those moments where I think about it. Even I'm like, all right, I want to go, and like I had worked out in the past for like 2 hours, and I haven't been doing it for the past 2 weeks. Damn, am I really just going to put on my shoes and just like walk outside for 30 seconds and then
Right.
come back in? Is that where I'm at right now? So
Yeah.
how do you navigate that for those people that are coming up with that excuse?
Yeah, I mean, I think that once again, it is a ironic thing that because I practice that same thing, where sometimes you feel so silly. You're like, this is ridiculous. Like, I literally just walked outside and I'm coming back in. But you have to go back, and this is like going back into the level of appreciation. Like, you know what? I appreciate the fact that I took one step. And it might be hard to challenge yourself to physically do this, but like, physically smile and laugh. Right? Physically smile. And if possible, laugh at that. Right? And just that little, like I said, all we're after in these moments of panic attacks, high anxiety, and I'm not talking about anyone that has literally like clinical stuff. I'm talking about, people who are not suffering from clinical anxiety and, people that are just normal anxiety that we have every single day. When you feel that, do the one thing, smile, and hopefully laugh. Right? Like hopefully be like, oh my God, I just did that. And just that laughter releases positive endorphins and emotion and feeling and energy inside of you. And it'll allow you actually to like say, what on earth am I stressed out about? Who, what is going on? Like it's a Sunday afternoon, like 99% of this world is watching football or, outside or doing whatever. And I'm stressed out about something I didn't get to today.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow's Monday. I'll knock it out.
Oh man, yeah, and it's just realizing too that well, it's interesting. There's two things that come up for me. One is why do you feel like there's this tension in the society of talking about things like anxiety in this like really serious and intense way? I've noticed that where it's almost trying to make it this really big and heavy thing where all of a sudden we're gonna get stuck in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, why do you think that comes up like on your end?
I think it comes up just because I think we've made such it's kind of, I don't know what the right way to say this, but like we've made the solutions so big when they're so small, right? And we've made these, the reality is to get in shape, you don't need to go work out all the time. You just need to do very, very small things consistently. To read a book, you just need to read 1 or 2 pages a day and you'll start to read that entire book. To meditate, like how many people on this earth or in our society know it's good to meditate? They don't do it. Why? Because it's like, where do I find 15 minutes in my day?
Yeah.
And then you look on their social media and there's 2 hours worth of scrolling through Instagram. And I think that's the other thing I'll come back to as well. I think it is such a big, we make it so big now because we have so much access to information. We also have so much access to addictive things like a cell phone. Let's be real, like trillions of dollars are spent on creating a device that is addictive, that hits the dopamine in our brain, that creates some of this anxiety, because when we're not getting the dopamine hits, that's when we feel anxious. And most people, when you notifications on your cell phones, if you want to do one thing off of this podcast to make yourself healthy, remove all notifications at the very least on your email, your text, and your social media. You don't need them. They're there to create dopamine hits and create addiction. Imagine a world like imagine your cell phone was a 6-pack of beer, right? And you carried this 6-pack of beer around, and every time it rang or beeped or buzzed, you drank a beer. Like no one on the earth would be like, oh my God, that's a good thing. But yet, what do? That's in essence what we're doing. We're carrying around this 6-pack of beer all day and getting these dopamine hits off of this device. And I do think at some point we're going to look back and recognize the negative side of cell phone usage, and how it's impacting our kids, us, a society. And I think that goes back to answering the question of why is it such a big thing? It's such a big thing because I can pick up that device and dive right in instead of going and walking outside.
Yeah.
Well,
I think of too with the beer, it's like reminds me of the college days where I was like the partying 6 nights a week. I'm like just like attached to the hip. That's an image right there. Yeah. And
think about that morning too. Like think of the analogy. Think of your cell phone as a 6-pack of beer. That's what sometimes helps me. Like, wait, I'm not going to pick that up and start drinking in the morning. So why would I pick up my cell phone and start using it right away?
Oh my, yeah. Like, and just thinking about like how that then compounds throughout the rest of the day too. And all of a sudden the influx of energy that you're having to take on and get stuck with too in those moments. It's interesting. I want to go here. What do you think you talked about the negatives. Like what do you feel on a bigger picture is happening right now with going into the rise in anxiety? I think of my generation with millennials. It's just there's such an intensity there, which then is leading into this loneliness epidemic that we're in. And I was looking, there was this survey I've talked about before where back in like 1990, it was said like 3% of people, of Americans, had zero close friends.
Yeah.
And now in 2021, I mean, a few years ago, it's 12% that don't have. So it's like a 300% increase. And I imagine people were so embarrassed they didn't even say that they had no close friends.
Yeah.
I'm sure that number is like way higher. But yeah, on a bigger scale of it, what do you notice is happening?
I just finished, well, not finished. I'm still almost done with reading this book. It's called The Anxious Generation. Mind blowing book. Changed a lot of my feelings around this cell phone usage. It really deals with the impact that especially your generation, like the impact that cell phones have had. Your generation is the first ones to grow up with a cell phone, and I think the impact is vast. And I think the ability to every single day compare yourself to perfection, number one. I think the influx of negative situations making you feel like the world is a terrible place and that I'm afraid to walk out my door because XYZ may happen. The reality is we're seeing crime levels drop, across the nation, and yet people feel less and less safe. Why? Because they go on their cell phone and they hear about a horrible situation that happened across the country or in their, maybe their neighborhood. But the reality is, like, we're being fed these negative stories because that's what people want to, that's clickbait on social media, right? So those are the two factors I come back to is the comparison mindset. I'm not good enough because I don't have fill in the blank. The second one is the constant consumption of negativity, negative energy, negative news. When all day you're consuming this, I mean, no wonder we feel like our country is in a horrible place. No wonder we feel like, our lives are not filled with meaning because we're not traveling across the world. And right, it just is one of those things. There's so many messages that are being fed to people right now that are just frankly damaging.
I feel you on that. And it's, oh yeah. How do we reverse course?
It's a great question. We reverse course by really becoming conscious of those three health: spiritual health, mental health, physical health. The reality is cell phones are not going to go anywhere. And once again, and there are positives, right? Me and you would never be friends to this day if we didn't have cell phones and Instagram and stuff like that. So there are positives to this. But the reality is that go back to that addictive mindset. If you're not good internally and you sort of have that addictive mindset around a cell phone, then that device is a bad thing. When you're good internally, then you can use that device as a tool, not as a negative can of beer, so to speak, right? And I think that's where you come back to almost. I actually can know when I'm feeling anxious by seeing how much I'm in the cell phone or not. You know what I mean? So if I'm feeling anxious, I notice how much more Instagram time I'm doing, text messages, like email, just I'm constantly checking it, and when I'm in a flow state, I mean, that thing barely, I'm not aware of its existence even, and it just creates this like really, really great. So that's how we course correct.
From the signs, like what would be some other signs that would come up for someone if they can't even really have that self-awareness yet of when they're anxious and when they're not? What are some other signs that they can notice?
One test I would challenge you. I challenge my students I teach, and I challenge myself. Little things like, can I put my cell phone across the room? Can I leave the house without the cell phone? That's a big one. When was the last time you left your house without your cell phone?
I'm trying to think about it. I could have been the walk. I did a walk this morning. I think I went over to the beach. I was like, I think I left it there. But even having to think about that, man, I get it.
Yeah.
I so get that.
And then, then you can start progressing deeper. Like, can you go a day without it? 2 days, and once again, I know some of us rely on it for work and, and, there's this fear as a parent, and I'm a parent, I have 2 kids. All right. Are my kids going to be able to get a hold of me? The reality is like, we live in a much more resilient world than we give ourselves credit for, you know? And yes, if I'm on a walk for 30 minutes without my cell phone and there's an emergency, someone A is either going to find me or they're going to handle that emergency themselves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
How do we be more consistent with resilience? Because that's something I feel has lacked in my generation. And I know others, I think Gen Z is the one that comes up where that can be something that really doesn't get talked about as much as I personally would like.
yeah,
So
yeah,
how do we make that consistent?
we fail more.
Mm.
We fail more. Like we become comfortable with failure and risk, right? We become, as a society, we become so uncomfortable with failure and risk that people just aren't resilient anymore. They're not able to bounce back because they don't fail enough, and usually it's because they're not taking great enough risks in their life. Like you got to risk things. You have to risk maybe, being embarrassed by walking over and talking to someone you don't know. You have to risk maybe, not performing to your ultimate level and getting on a stage and speaking in front of people. Or if you're thinking about launching a business, like there's risk involved in everything we do. But when we're comfortable with failure, you actually almost eliminate the risk. The risk is often self-created and often just a farce. It often is not real. It's just our brains trying to protect us from doing things that make us vulnerable.
For you, what's like a recent situation where you have felt like that kind of moment of having to step out and take the leap?
I mean, launching this company, so 6 months ago, I made the decision to do it more than 6 months ago, but I left my cushy, secure position as the head of coaching for a national real estate company, Compass Real Estate. I was traveling all over the country, teaching people. I had a great salary. But I knew I had a burning desire I am an entrepreneur. I had a burning desire to go back to building a business. And then I also had a burning desire to sort of push myself and do something really fucking scary.
Yep.
At my stage in life, I'm happily divorced. I have a great co-parent, but I also have a very large, alimony child support bill that I pay every month gladly. Like I love, supporting my ex-wife and obviously my kids and everything like that. So it's not like I'm sitting here living at my mom's basement, like zero expenses. Like my expenses are pretty high. So that risk of launching this company and, was pretty great. And once again, why I still to this day, and I'm probably any entrepreneur out there, anyone that builds a business, if you don't feel some level of anxiety or risk, you're probably not doing it at a big enough level, and the biggest thing is becoming comfortable with the fact that, hey, I'm going to do this. What is the risk? The risk is I go back to another job or I go back into selling real estate. All right. So the reality is there really is no risk other than I'm going to work a little harder than I would have been at that other job. And the reward is so incredibly great. The what if, what could happen is like so sweet. It's so big. And that's what gets me so excited, and that's what gets you over the risk. And failure is part of every day of your experience running a business. Every day you fail. Every day you don't do something perfect. You don't do something right. Someone, doesn't sign up for your program or passes on you or doesn't unsubscribes from an email, then you're like, oh my God, why'd they unsubscribe? You get the point. Just failure is part of everything that we do. And we got to become really comfortable with it. And when we get comfortable with risk and failure, that's where we can start to do really big things and build that resiliency. The other thing I'll give you is that I want to challenge everyone to think of this concept of becoming unconditionally happy. And what that means is my happiness is not conditioned upon anything outside of me. So failure in my career. I'm not saying that's a great thing, but you can be happy through a failure. A relationship ending. Once again, not something that people want or desire, but you still can be happy through it, right? And this concept of, and this is not like toxic positivity or anything along those lines. It's sort of going back to this world of appreciation, right? Of if you're constantly in this world of appreciation, going back into taking care of yourself, going back into trying to create this unconditional world where, it doesn't matter if someone's upset at me. It doesn't matter if, the Eagles lose a football game, or it doesn't matter if, whatever happens. You know what? I'm really, really fucking happy. And I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to be really happy. I'm going to infuse that happiness into everything that I do. And as things happen through my life, that this unconditional mindset is what gets me through failure, risk, anxiety, stress, all of the above, and allows me to sort of operate at a really, really high level.
Yeah, because two things. Because I remember you've talked about when I was looking the worst case scenario, like that you've talked about that. I want to dive into that a little bit more, but then also, yeah, like when the waves hit, like going back to you launching the company, having to go through the divorce, like. I mean, people could be like, "Oh, it'd be great to like appreciate and always look at the happiness," but like it hits you. So, like for you, what was coming up in those moments, or one specifically that resonates for an experience? Would be great to like dive into.
Yeah. Well, and this is where you go back into the importance of having a routine around health and wellness. Cannot be stressed enough. It is so incredibly critical that everyone develops a routine that is replicatable and that you can lean on in times of high stress. Because when the waves hit, and the reality of life, waves are coming. The reality is not that the waves are not coming. They are coming. And some of them are going to be really big and some are going to be really small. But here's the reality, the waves are coming. So what will get you through those times is your routine and your structure around making sure you are doing everything in your power to be healthy, spiritually, mentally, physically. And when those big waves hit, there's a good chance that you're not going to feel it at all times, but that's where the routine is going to be even more important. So everyone, in my opinion, once again, we talk about reversing this anxiety addiction and everything like that. We got to go back into a world where we say, this is my non-negotiable. This is a non-negotiable. Like, I am doing this. And you know what? And there are going to be days maybe where I don't do it, and that's okay. I'm not going to beat myself up. But if you develop a routine that is replicatable, consistent, and it's geared around at least those three concepts, right? Mental, spiritual, physical health, every single day, let's be real, we get to fill our cup. And then when the wave hits, it's gonna take that cup down, right? And it's gonna get maybe close to empty, but then next morning we try to fill it back up. And this process of sort of walking through life in a way where we know we're gonna get hit and crushed by a wave, right? You're in the ocean, you know it's coming, and I know I'm gonna try to duck dive underneath it and let it roll over me. But sometimes that happens and I pop up and I'm like, okay, I'm good. And sometimes I pop up and I'm like, oh shit, there's another wave coming. And it's the routine, the practice that allows you eventually to swim out of those waves and into smoother water.
It reminds me, it just so resonates what you're saying. And it reminds me of the, you're going to survive this. Like just remembering that through the shit and through those like really intense moments of just getting hit with the waves, like just that seeing that and then feeling that. But there was one thing too that can come up where it's like the commitments that we make to ourselves, and where in those moments it is that fine line where it's giving yourself grace because it's not going to be perfect and you're going to have those off days. And then it's like, having to come on back and honoring those commitments. And I think about that in my own journey in life. What has been one of the most impactful things for me to make sure that I make burnout extinct and have reverse course whenever I start seeing the red flags pop up of me moving back towards it is honoring the commitments. So how can that for someone, how can they bring that into awareness of like, a way to see that they're honoring these commitments and being reminded of those
Yeah.
commitments that they keep?
The first thing is you got to write it out.
Yeah.
Like you literally should, take a piece of paper and write out what your routine is. So it's extremely, extremely visible. The second thing, and this is something that I don't always do because I'm in a good space in my practice when I'm not in a good space, you got to create something that you can track your progress, right? Like our brains are not designed to remember what we did 6 days ago, right? So what happens is that when we're tracking it and we feel like maybe, are we off? No, oh no. I've been doing it. Look at this sheet, this checkbox, this list, whatever it is that you use to track it. Don't make it complicated. Literally take a piece of paper, write out my routine, write out, 1 through 7 for this week. And every day I'm going to if I do it, I'll cross it off. And this way I can see. The third element, which is probably the most important one to success in this, is don't do it alone. And when I say don't do it alone, that doesn't mean you need to do your routine with someone, but that means you need to be making this commitment and literally holding yourself accountable, not alone. It's very, very difficult to be accountable to yourself. It's not difficult to be accountable to another person. So those are the 3 items. You got to make it visible and write it down. You got to track it, and you got to be accountable to someone else outside of you. You put those 3 factors in place, there's a 95% chance that you're going to develop this routine in a pretty high level. If you miss one of those 3, there's a very, very high chance you're not going to develop the routine. So those are the 3 factors. Again, write it down, make it visible, track it. How am I doing? So I can sort of judge my progress or success. And then don't do it alone. Create someone out there in the world that you can be accountable to and with as well. So
how do you start for that accountability? I think about it for, we just talked about the loneliness that's out there for the epidemic and like the feeling that there's no one that someone could be accountable with. Like what are ways that someone could start that process of finding other people that are on the similar journey?
One thing is just asking for help, right? You'll be amazed if you just raise your hand and say, hey, I need help. Is anyone willing to help me? So that's one. Social media is a great platform for that. 2 would be finding groups that you resonate with, so whether it's a workout class and you have you and one of your friends are doing that workout class, whether it's a meditation group or yoga or hiking or biking, whatever it is, find a group that's doing it and then find someone else that either will do that group with you or within the group that that's 1, 2. The third one is that most likely you have someone that's really close to you that you're not being vulnerable enough with about what's going on in your life. So the third thing is become really, really comfortable with vulnerability and recognize how powerful it is to be vulnerable compared to, holding all that in. It's so powerful. And when you just are open with people and honest and say, listen, I am not feeling good right now. Can you help me with fill in the blank? You'll be shocked at the return, the love that comes back to you. And the reality is you're going to do that for someone else in the future. You don't know when, who, where, etc., but you will. And the more that you put it out there, the more you're going to get that return to you.
When it does feel like a domino effect that happens, like it's like once you knock that first one down, it just becomes a series of all of a sudden, who else can I share what's going on with, or who else can I help and support now that I've been able to get that support? And I feel that gets lost with a lot of people where they don't even get started because they don't know what's going to be the benefits on the other end of this thing and that uncertainty.
Yep. That's it. Yeah. And you just got to start. Again, take that one step, send the one text, put the one post out there, join the one group, It doesn't matter what it is, you got to take that step.
What's like the act, like if we're gonna get super specific, what's because someone could get so overwhelmed with even like, all right, how the hell do I word this text? Like, I don't want to come off as too weird or like kind of like, really desperate. What's like a simple breakdown for the text that can be sent?
My favorite tactic is to share a photo. So like your text literally says, "Hey, I'm trying to work out this week. Can you hold me accountable to sharing a photo with you every day that I work out, of me working out, the weights, the run, the bike, whatever it might be," right? So that's an easy one. A second one, if you're trying to, let's say, instill meditation, is I'm going to share the meditation that I'm doing with you. And if you're doing like a guided one, and I'm going to text you an image or a screenshot of the meditation or something like that. So sharing text messages, it doesn't need to be anything massive or big, right? Is the easiest way to do it. The text message asking for help, it literally is, "Hey, got a minute? I need some help." Like it literally is that, and don't overthink it. Don't like put all this energy into it, and like just ask for help, raise your hand, and that's it. And I think also put yourself in the receiver's shoes. If they needed help, would you be the person that would give it to them if they reached out to you?
Yeah, and it's like, how do you navigate those of us that would be like, oh, I'm trying to create something big in the world, that big impact, the big challenges. I don't have time for this. Like, there's no way this can be fit into my schedule. Of even though I know that there's some areas of my life that are not doing so hot right now that could absolutely be using some support.
Yeah.
How do you get through? Like, what's the thing? What's the thing you want to say to that person to
Make
get
it,
through to them?
yeah, it's an easy one. Make it small.
Yeah.
Make it small. Just make it small. Like, yes, and because I feel that same way right now personally, right? Like, man, I got so much that I got to get to, and I'm telling myself to make it small, and that small win is success, right? So our definition of success can change and vary, or the image of success, I should say, can change and vary, right? To fit our definition. So if your definition of success is to be healthy, well, that's a pretty broad definition. What does that mean within that? And how can I make it really, really small? How can I make it really manageable? Because the one word that always comes to my mind around success, around anything, business, life, health, etc., is consistency. If you do something and you do it consistently, 99% of the time, it's going to be successful. So if you're running a business and your business is dependent upon lead generation calls, and you do those successfully, usually you're going consistently, usually you're going to be successful. If you're trying to be healthy, there's how many diets out there? They all work.
Yeah.
Right? They all work if you follow them consistently. Why they don't go is because people will do them for a week or two and then go right back to what they normally do. So whatever it is that you need to do, you establish a consistency and you start in doing something just keep it small in those high times of stress. Well, again, running around the block is better than not running at all, and doing a push-up is better than not doing one. Meditating for a minute, better than not meditating at all. So you get back into this mode that small is good.
And what happens when someone gets bored? Because like it's gonna get to that point, even in good, like in the good times. It's like I think about that in my own journey. It's like you'll get it where you'll hit that wall of boredom, and it's like that's where it can fall off. Yeah, what are ways to like work around that?
Yeah. Biggest one is create a reward. Like, right? When you're feeling bored, like your tendency to like stop doing the thing you should be doing will be really high in those time frames of boredom. So to get around that, one of the biggest things is to create a reward around it. Like, all right, not a punishment, a reward. Like, and this will hopefully inspire you to do the work you need to do. And then the other thing as well, I go back into, usually we get bored because we're doing it alone and we're doing it without a why or a purpose. So the other thing you want to go back to is what is the why around me doing this? And what's the purpose around me doing this? And if that's not big, and if that's not real to you, you may want to reevaluate it, because if you're not really connected to a why and a purpose behind what you're doing, you know, that boredom could be a sign that your why is not very strong and your purpose is not very strong. And what you're trying to accomplish is not strongly connected to those two things.
Oh, yeah. Where does this drive come from for this mission? Like, what do I not know that would make sense of why this is so important for you?
Where does it come from? That's a wonderful question. My first response is I'm not really sure where it comes from. I guess the way I would answer it would be it's a culmination of my life work right now, right? It's a culmination of, growing up poor as a young kid and amazing sisters and mom and everything like that, but just, growing up poor started it, right? And then having that drive to change the trajectory of my life. So when I had kids, that they wouldn't be in that same economic space that I was. I think it comes from this, my connection into athletics and sports, and the knowledge that of the impact of teams and doing big things with people that you love. It cannot be underestimated. And then I think it just comes back into this constant drive and the knowledge that I call this concept that life is like climbing a mountain that has no top. The reality is like I'm on a climb. There is no end to this climb, right? And every goal or accomplishment or anything I set that I achieve, all that is like a little base camp in the climb. And it's this knowledge and realization that I've come to of like, wow, like I'm a really happy person. And I've uncovered some of these things and I want to impart this to other people. And I can impart that to other people. And I can change lives by changing my own, which is so crazy to think about. So when I came, that's, I guess, the nexus of like where it really came from is that, that the childhood growing up, the fact that we always knew everything was going to work out great. We recreated unconditional happiness in our lives early on in my life. And then throughout, athletics and business and, all the things that I've done in my life, this culmination of the energy, so to speak, now that I stand in is like, I want to actually take this knowledge and impart it to as many people as I possibly can and watch their lives transform the way mine has.
Was there a conversation that comes up for you, like as you're going through that sticks out, especially early on in childhood or even in athletics? Like, was there something that really had hit home for you to also support you and fuel you to keep going on this journey for unconditional happiness?
There's lots of conversations. Like we all probably can remember certain conversations that changed our lives, right? So one of the first ones that I do remember is when I made a decision I went to Syracuse University and I only went on a recruiting visit there. I was on the rowing team there. I went on a recruiting visit only because my favorite math teacher, Mrs. Sanford, her brother-in-law was the head coach. And she just was like, in my ear, like, go visit, just go visit. I was like, all right, let me just go visit. And I went, I fell in love. And to this day, that experience of rowing 4 years at Syracuse, made me who I am, gave me some of my most amazing and precious friendships and, a brotherhood that I will cherish and hold with me the rest of my life. I also will remember a conversation with a gentleman named Bill Curry, who I was a high school history teacher. And he was an older teacher, on the verge of retirement. And we were at a happy hour after parent teacher night on my first year of teaching. And I loved teaching. I loved being a high school history teacher, but I was struggling financially still. I was like full time, I had a master's degree. And Bill Curry said to me, if I could go back and do it all over again, I would get my real estate license, sell real estate part-time, and teach full-time. And so I took that one conversation the next day, Googled real estate license, signed up. And so that one conversation literally changed the trajectory of my entire life because I, grew up thinking I was just going to be a high school history teacher, coach football, do the classic teacher path. And I fell into real estate just to make a little extra money. And I just fell in love with that entire industry and career, and that has transformed who I am. So I don't have like specific memories of like anything earlier than that, other than like tons of conversations around life and, happiness, reading. I was a huge reader. My mom was a librarian, so I just read books constantly. So but those are two of the conversations that stick out in my mind as the ones that sort of changed my life.
And I resonate with the conversations because, like, in the moment we may not appreciate how big of an impact it can have, but what comes up for me with that is also the belief that someone has in you and the willingness to bet on you that you can do this and show you in a new light. For like one that comes up for me is my college professor, Dr. Dave Wyman, who that's how I got into entrepreneurship, was through that class. And I was actually able to go up and present, and I was terrified. I was so scared to like go up and talk to people. But the way that he believed in how he taught and allowed me to get comfortable on stage, on that stage, then opened up to a whole new arena, a
Yeah.
possibility to take it into a career. And it's so interesting that those moments can come up, and sometimes we can just brush it off and not actually reflect as to how powerful that is, going back to appreciation, that then fuel us to keep going down that path that comes up. Yeah. Change. Why do people struggle with it?
Oh God, it's so funny because I'm so comfortable in change. I'm almost more comfortable in change than I am out not having change. And if I track my career, I usually have about a 4 to 5 year window before I make a massive change, and I can, sort of go back through my career. Why are people not comfortable with it? It's, once again, I think a little bit goes back into some of what we talked about before, that they're not comfortable with failure. They don't know how to evaluate and take risk. And in change, they feel they're constantly looking at the worst case. And this is a concept I call creating stories. I got it from Landmark training. If you ever did Landmark, it's awesome. We're story making machines, right? So what your brain is doing in change is constantly creating a negative story of what could happen in order to try to protect you, because your brain is not designed to push you. Your brain is not your friend. Your brain has one job, and that is to keep you alive. That's it. That's its only job, is to keep you alive. And it's our job to actually tell our brains, hey, there is no danger right now. I am safe. I am successful. I am secure. We are moving forward. Thank you for warning me, but this is happening and I'm excited about it. So most people don't understand that we're geared at creating these negative stories to prevent change and stop it from happening. Right. So what you have to do is create the positive. When you feel that negativity creep up, the fear, the risk, all this stuff, you have to literally visualize and imagine this other world that you're going to create on the other side of change. It's like, go back to that mountain analogy, right? I'm climbing the mountain. I can't see over this next cliff, but I know it's beautiful there. And I'm going to keep climbing. But my God, there's going to be a beautiful valley on the other side of this climb that I'm going to get to spend some time in before I start climbing again. And I think we come back into that world of like comfort with change, comfort with risk, comfort with failure. And when you're comfortable with failure and you have the knowledge that whatever happens, it's great. It's by design. It is not a negative. It is all leading us down this road into positivity. That's where life really opens up for you.
Yeah.
Great.
When confidence is the one that comes up for the word, like facing that. For me, I define it as the trust you have within yourself to handle whatever is coming your way.
Yeah.
And you saying that, it just resonates with how powerful you can feel moving through that change and then continuing on your journey. Honor what comes your way, but then keep going and keep discovering for possibilities that come your way.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah. It's it. So powerful, man.
Oh man. What's a question that's coming up, like that I haven't asked you? Like, what's a question that's coming up right now that you feel is really important for your work that you feel we need to talk about?
The thing that's coming up is the faith. I don't know exactly how to frame this question, but like, this is what I was feeling a little bit today. I'm like, 6 months in, success, you look at the metrics, it's successful. How do you have the faith that it's all going to work out?
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's the question that I think I was pondering today, and because like I said, these are those moments that the wave hits you where you're like, oh my God, you suck your breath in. You're like, oh my God, I'm in the wave. Oh my God. And how do you instill faith that it's all going to work out? This is all by design. This is all meant to be, so that's the question I think today I was pondering, struggling with, feeling,
What for like the messy exploration right now? What came up for you in some of the reflections with that question?
Well, this is where I went back to appreciation, where I felt anxiety today, like I, once again, I enjoyed watching an Eagles game. I didn't get some of the phone calls that I was going to make that I had on my to-do list. And I had our podcast coming up, right? Like, I want to get to bed early to wake up early tomorrow morning, all this stuff swirling, and when I came back to it, I literally just did that process of appreciation where I took a piece of paper out in my journal, and just started writing the list. And it instantly got me back into a calm state and back into a state where, I know I have faith that this journey is leading me somewhere beautiful and big. I don't really know exactly where, but I can't wait. I can feel it. I can feel the energy. And there's and when I was in that high state of anxiety, that's where I couldn't feel that energy. Making the list, talking to you, getting really present again, reinfuse that. So
Yeah, and it comes up for me of the body connection with presence, being able to reconnect with the body, find those different ways, like if it's breath to just reconnection with a body scan. I've talked about that, to other ways to get grounded and in that space and appreciation, like writing it out. We tend to want to like sometimes push away the presence and like focus on that future in those moments. So that comes up when you were saying that. And it's interesting with faith. Yeah. I feel like with faith, it's like kind of like going back to what you talked about with like worst case. It's like, well, if it doesn't work out, then it won't even matter. Like, because I'm going to be dealing with the worst case anyway. So I might as well have faith that it is going to work out, because I don't want that. I don't want that future on that other end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's the kind of thing. It's like that pressure of like, always making sure you're providing something. Like, are people liking this? Do people, are they getting value for it? Are they enjoying it? You go back into these self-doubt questions maybe that you feel, and then you're like, hey, look at the evidence. Almost no one's backed out in 6 months. Almost more and more people are joining. I'm still not even, optimized in my marketing and my emails and my, I'm still barely touching the surface. And this is where it is. Like, holy shit, where could it go? That's what gets exciting.
Thank you, Skye. I appreciate you for being a part of it, being on the show, like just looking at that possibilities, and especially all the different things you talked about today.
Yeah.
I know it's going to make an impact for those listening in and watching. If people want to learn more about your work, how do they find you?
Easiest way is probably on Instagram, at Skye Michiels, which is spelled a little differently. It's SKYE Michiels. The other way, you could go to my website, withheartcoaching.com. So WITHHEART coaching.com. I don't want to spell the whole thing out. And then you can also email me at skye@withheartcoaching. But I'd be thrilled to talk to anyone. I coach any human being. So I specialize a little bit with entrepreneurs and realtors and business owners. But at the end of the day, I actually currently am coaching some teachers, realtors, mortgage people, title people. So it runs the gamut of who I can address. And I think the biggest thing I hope everyone got from this is to be healthy, selfish. Every day, wake up and focus on doing one thing for your spirit, one thing for your mind, one thing for your body. Fill your cup first, and before you go and try to fill others.
Thank you. Appreciate you.